Do you remember these two tags I created together with Marlies at Marley Design? We met at my place for a week to create a mini-series about techniques using Ranger's distress paints, and these two tags were among the projects we made. In case you missed this series, you can find a playlist linked below this video where you can watch all of the videos belonging to this series. Well, what can I say? I'm sitting here with mixed emotions because Marlies has already left and returned home. We had such a great time together and we got along so well that we've decided that we don't want to end this series just yet. So today we will give you two more videos in this series, one here on my channel and one on her channel, where we want to show you something special. Take a look here. This happened. We cut our two tags in half when we said goodbye to each other. Here I have one half of the tag that I have made. And here I have a half of the tag Marlies has created. Our challenge today is to put these two halves back together and create something beautiful out of it. Hi there, this is Luise Heinzel. Nice to see you here today for this challenge of reassembling these two half tags. For the focal point of my project, I want to use this photo of this woman here. This photo is from a brand new ephemera pack that I created for my Etsy shop. That ephemera pack is called Vintage Photo Strips and you can see it here. Let me quickly show you what this is and what you can do with it. As you can see, it has a lot of vintage photos, which you can cut like you want. For example, you can cut strips like this one here, for example, or you can, of course, cut them separately. You could cut them horizontally or vertically in different sizes, of course, depending on how many photos you cut out. Here on the right, you can see 2 would work as well, or 3, or 5, or 4, how many you like to have for your project. When you print that out, it looks like this. So it's a full sheet of those photos. So that means you could also take these sheets and just fold them in half to use them as like normal pages for your junk journal. I wanted to have this pack as versatile as possible, so perhaps you can find some inspiration for your own projects with this set, which you can find linked below this video in the description box. So let's get started with our focal point. And I have this frame here. This comes from the Tim Holtz idea-ology line, and I want to put that around the photo here, and perhaps you can guess where I got my inspiration from for this idea. I'm talking about this amazing booklet which Marlies has created for the Tim Holtz idea-ology line, and she has given it to me. Oh, I'm still so in love with this little thing. It's so much inspiration, and I want to try to make my own version of an altered photo, like Marlies has done it on the cover of this booklet as well. So I'm trying to see what she has done, and I'm trying to remember what I have learned from her videos, because she has a whole series about this booklet on her channel. If you don't know that series, please check that out. It's just amazing. You can learn so much from that series. I'm using Lost Shadow Distress ink to bring a little bit more grunge to my photo. Marlies has used vintage photo, I guess, but for this photo I thought Lost Shadow would match better because the photo itself is already relatively grayish. Now I'm using a little bit of collage medium. I'm using a paintbrush to be able to apply this in a very thin layer. I'm doing that so because I want my next medium to stick to this surface very well, and collage medium can help for that. But you only need a really thin layer, so don't apply it too thick. And while the collage medium is still a little bit wet, I'm taking some tweezers and I'm going over the surface relatively aggressively, I would say, but only in some areas to roughen up the surface. I want to have some like real damages that have also a little bit of texture. And while the paper is still a little bit wet from the collage medium, which has not dried yet completely, this is a really easy thing. And I think with like tweezers or a pokey tool, you can reach a really cool effect with not so much effort. I mean, this is really easy and you can control it really, really well. So that's the reason why I like to do it like that. Now I'm taking some bookbinder's glue and I'm putting that all over the backside of this thing to be able to glue that to a piece of scrap paper. This is just a little bit thicker craft paper in this neutral color, as you can see, because I want to, as I said, make my own version of such an altered photo. And I thought I want to do something a tiny bit different than Marlies has done it. So I want to make a really rough frame around the metal frame later. That's why I have cut this a little bit bigger than the original thing is. Now I'm taking, while this is drying, I'm taking some Distress Crackle paint. And perhaps you can see, I have never done that before. So what you can see here is my first attempt on putting this to a photo. I was, to be honest, a little bit scared because I thought I don't know how thick I shall apply that. But I've learned from Marlies that you can apply that in a thicker layer so that you get nice crackles. So I was very brave and I've tried that. So while that is drying, I have this vignette display panel here, which I want to use to display my tag later. I thought I don't want to just create a normal tag to put it into a journal and then it's gone, but I want to create something that I can hang to my wall later, and I want to display the tag and with that also our time that we had together. Here I have prepared some collage strips, also by Tim Holtz. While the panel is drying, I'm distressing the edges of these strips a little bit. I've cut them into smaller pieces and now I'm taking my scissors to roughen the edges. I want to have a really worn look. I want to use these for collaging them to the background of the vignette display panel to create something like, a really rough, worn, shabby, vintage wallpaper look, even if, of course, a wallpaper wouldn't have such a pattern like the collage strips have. Yeah, do you know what I mean? But the look of it shall be like that. Here you can see me struggling a little bit with the size of those strips. After I have sewn around them a little bit like crazy with my sewing machine, I realized that 5 of those strips would fit next to each other into the panel, but 6 would be too much and I didn't want to have 5.5 of those rows. Do you know what I mean? That looked really, really strange. And then I came to the idea, and I think that was a good idea because in the end I thought that looks way, way better than what I had in mind in the beginning. So I've measured the half of this panel and there I started collaging. So that means the strip in the middle is in the middle of the panel so that I had an orientation for the rest. And when I had that glued down, the rest was totally easy because I could just lay them next to each other and glue them down. And as you can see now, around those papers, we have a really a relatively thick frame, I would say. But in my eyes, and please compare that to the end result later, that gives it way more interest than if I would have glued the pieces to the very edge of this wooden box. Now I'm using some oxide sprays and a spray stain. I have Lost Shadow oxide spray and spray stain and pumice stone oxide spray. And I'm beginning with the oxide sprays. Perhaps you wonder why I'm doing that, because they cover up a lot of the pattern and the images on the collage strips, but I did that on purpose. I wanted to have this background really, really muted, and I wanted to see some of those elements from the collage strips, but I wanted to use the oxidation and the look of the oxide spray to get a really chalky finish. I've also used some water to bring this around a little bit better and to activate the oxide effect, of course. This whole thing gets really wet when you do it like this. So what I perhaps should mention is I haven't dried that in between. Yeah, I'm just going on and on and on, and I'm spritzing and applying the ink like a wet in wet technique. So here, for example, you can see me applying the Lost Shadow Distress Spray Stain with the nozzle of the sprayer. Yeah, as you can see, that is not a thing that works in minutes. When I did this, I thought I'm going crazy, but then I decided to just splatter around a little bit by pressing not so hard to the sprayer so that I get just some drops here and there, so that this color is there in some way, but you know, it's not so visible. Oh, sorry, it's not so visible, but it's there. And while this was still very wet, I have taken the chance to use my fingernail tool to crumble the edges of these pieces a little bit to make them really rough and especially textured, because I wanted to let this look like it's really worn and nearly like falling off. And I also wanted to bring out those gaps in between of those pieces a little bit more. For that, I'm using here some Distress Oxide Refiller Lost Shadow and also the Distress Ink Refiller Lost Shadow. And this is something I have to admit, I have never done that before in this way, mixing the ink refiller and the oxide ink refiller in this way, but I have to say that worked so well. I've spritzed some water to move the ink around a little bit, and when you use the oxide ink, or it's the same with the ink as well. If you use the ink or the oxide ink directly from the refiller, please make sure that you spritz enough water so that the ink has a chance to dry. If you just apply the ink directly from the refiller, then it will take forever to dry, and it will dry not completely. So I have made the experience on my projects that dries not completely. Later on, when you go over that with your finger, you still have such a smear on your finger. So make sure that you have enough water so that the ink can react a little bit with that. I don't know if that's correct what I'm saying here, if that is the correct English word. I'm sorry if not, but I think you know what I mean, so that you can make sure that everything in the end is really totally dry, because you don't want to have that on your fingers when you touch your project, of course. For some more contrast, I'm applying some more Distress Ink Lost Shadow from the refiller. And I am taking this paintbrush to help me move the ink around a little bit. And I've also applied a little bit of that color to the wood that is next to the paper. Do you know what I mean? We have this wooden frame on the background all around, and I'm trying to build some layers and make this more interesting. So I'm also using another color here now. This is Ground Espresso Oxide Ink Refiller, and I've chosen this brown because I wanted to have the colors a little bit more warm. This gray is relatively cold at the moment, I would say. Not in every spot, but the whole thing looked a little bit too grayish and too cold for me. So I've decided to add this brown to make it a little bit warmer. And I'm also applying a lot of water to be able to let this run around a little bit more. When you have an area like I have here at the moment, where you think there's too much ink, of course you can take a paper towel and just lift that off. And the rest, the stain that you have there then, I think gives a lot of interest for such a background. So I'm trying to do this relatively irregular and without thinking. If you have never done something like this and you perhaps now think, ooh, that looks very, very strange. What is she doing there? There's so much water, so much ink. Please just trust your process, because in the end it will look really, really great. But it's a mess. Of course, it's a mess. But you can decide if you like it in the end. When you see it later, when it's dry, then you can decide if you like it and if you want to try it out, of course. So here I've cut myself a piece of really, really thick cardboard, and this is 4 millimeters thick. I'm gluing both of the pieces of the tags there back together so that I have one tag. And perhaps you might wonder, why the heck is she using such a thick material to glue that on? It's nearly like wood. Yeah, it's really, really stiff, but I wanted it exactly like that because I want to place my tag into this display panel, but not just gluing it down. I want to lift it up a little bit so that it stands out from the background. You will see that in a second, what I mean. Here you can see the dried crackle paint on this photo, and I'm so happy with how this turned out. And by the way, the reason why I have chosen this photo is so simple. This woman has a face expression that showcases the time that Marlies and I had together here at my place. This woman is everything that we had together. She's a little bit older than we are, but I get goosebumps all over my body when I see this photo, because this is just us, and it's just heartwarming for me. So here I've roughened up this cardboard edge of the frame, and I'm applying some oxide spray Lost Shadow and some of the refiller ink Lost Shadow to get this a little bit stained as well. And I've also spritzed some water to let that move around a little bit, so that I now have a really, really, like rough and old looking edge. I've also applied some oxide ink refiller of the Lost Shadow color to the crackle paint, but only a tiny little bit, because I wanted to have those like light areas, light damages. That makes it just a little bit more interesting. And now I'm using a ton of ephemera pieces from the 2023 Ideology release. And here I've sped up the video a little bit because, if I would have shown you that in real time, this video would have taken forever. And I wanted to show you, I wanted to give you an imagination of my process, so that I thought it could be good to see how I do it. But when you see it in real time, perhaps you can't follow so well as when you see it a little bit sped up. I don't know if that makes sense, but here is what I have done. I was really surprised about this yellow rose, which you can see above the photo, because I've placed that there just because I had it in my hands. Yeah. Do you know those situations? You have something in your hand and you place it there, and then you think, what is that? It's like matching. It's like strange at the same time. And that's what I experienced here. But somehow I thought, let's go on with this yellow. And that's the reason why I have added several different other yellow pieces of the Ideology ephemera there. And I've tried to get like a balance with the yellow. The tag in the background is relatively challenging color-wise, I would say. This orange and the gold on the top and the green and the brown on the bottom, they are like, it's the same again. It's like matching, but it's like something that's biting each other as well. And this was really, really hard for me to get a balance between the colors. But perhaps you have also already experienced this phenomenon with ideology ephemera. I don't know if I'm the only one, but for me it's often like this. I start, I think, okay, I want to use this ephemera. Then I'm starting building some layers. I'm starting collaging without gluing anything, yeah, just laying the pieces on top of each other and next to each other to see how it can look in the end. And then there's this point where I think, what is this? What does this want to be? Yeah, so I'm not happy. I'm not unhappy as well, but I'm not satisfied. And I think, what the heck is that? This is so strange that I can't disassemble it again. Is that the right word? I can't take it apart because it looks good in some way, but I'm not satisfied. And for me, with ideology, it's so often exactly the same thing. You go on and on and on, and you take some other pieces, like those really intense leaves, for example, and you put them there, just like playing around like a child, puzzling things together. And then there comes this one moment where you think, okay, now I think this is becoming mine. This is going to become a masterpiece. Yeah. So I can already perhaps tell you that for me, but that's a personal emotion, of course, this piece is a masterpiece. When you see that in the end, perhaps you agree that this is one of the best pieces I've ever created. That sounds arrogant, but what I'm trying to say is, I wish you this feeling, yeah, that you think, huh, what is that? Perhaps it's turning into a fail, but then you go on and on and on and on. You add things, you move things around, you are playing around like a child. And then there comes this moment where you think, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm creating a masterpiece right now. And this feeling for yourself is what matters. Yeah. If you think this is ugly, what I have on my desk here, that doesn't matter. You can think it's ugly. You can think I can take some inspiration because I wouldn't do it like Louise is doing it here, and I do it totally different. And then you have your masterpiece, and my goal is reached. Do you know what I mean? So at this point, I thought it could be a good idea to glue these pieces together and distress them and ink them a little bit. So I have taken them out carefully so that I was able to glue the pieces together. And I'm doing this here in a really like a strange method because, as you can see, I'm gluing first. And after that, I've distressed and inked the pieces. You will see that in a second. Because for me, this is easier. I have a really big problem to remember where which piece was, especially in such a big collage. I mean, this collage has many, many pieces, and that's really hard for me to remember where the pieces were. So I'm gluing them together, exactly like they come from the ephemera pack. And then I'm taking my ink and my fingernail tool to make them a little bit more old. So first I'm applying the ink here with this brush. If I remember that right, this is ground espresso oxide ink, but of course you can choose the color which you like the best. And then I take my fingernail tool and go in between of the layers of the paper, and I'm just folding and crumbling them up a little bit. Then of course we see the white of the paper in between, but that's no problem. We can just take the brush and go over it again and make that more brownish. But this way, when I glue that first, I can better see, better what I'm doing there and how this whole piece will look in the end. I have a better feeling for that than if I would do that separately, piece by piece. Yeah, so perhaps that's a trick for you as well. And another trick, but perhaps that's obvious, is to cut off the pieces which you don't see in the end. So this is what I have here, and I've cut off the right part of the yellow ephemera piece because that wouldn't be seen in the end, and I can save that for later, of course. So that way you can save some material. So here I'm using some foam pads to get a little distance to the background, because I don't want to have this like flat sitting in this panel. So I have raised up some of the collaged areas, like this on the left side and a piece on the right. Later I will raise it up as well. And I'm using these little wooden pieces. They just come from the children's, from a store where they sell children's toys. And they were really cheap, and I really love to use those for exactly those projects. You can glue them together really easily. I'm using some bookbinders glue to glue them together. That dries within seconds. I guess you could use collage medium as well, but yeah, I normally use bookbinders glue. That works really, really well, and it dries really fast. I use those to raise up those areas. That's not correct. I use those to raise up the tag. So I just glue them below the tag later, and they help me here to get an imagination of how this whole thing will look in the end. And it also helps to put the ephemera pieces, oh, I'm sorry, below the tag. So perhaps if you want to create something where you have really, really many collage pieces, especially tiny pieces, and you want to layer them, perhaps you can, even if you don't want to have this raised look in the end, perhaps you can take those wooden pieces or something else to just raise your project up, to be able to just slide the pieces that you want to have there below there. As you can see, I can just take my tweezers. I can easily move that around a little bit. Even when the glue is there, I can move that around and I can see exactly where this piece has to go. On such a rough background like I have here, I like to use a bone folder to go over the pieces to make sure that everything is glued down really nice and flat. This piece that I have here on the right, I want to raise a little bit as well. So I'm taking some more foam pads and I'm gluing them to the back, so that I have, in the end, two different distances. One is the height of the foam pads, and the other distance is the height of two, I guess, of the wooden pieces that I have glued together, so that we have a whole bunch of layers in the end in this panel. So now I'm working on the tag itself. So I want to see if I can also imitate some of Marlies techniques. And when I say imitate, I mean not reproducing it one, like in German we would say eins zu eins. I think 1-to-1 is not a right English word. I don't want to have a twin of Marlies project, but I want to make my own out of it, and I especially want to use those materials that I have in my stash. And for those tiny details that she has put to her frame as well, I'm using these really, really tiny ephemera pieces. In this basket that you can see there, there's a really crazy mix of idea-ology ephemera and also some cut out pieces from some paper pads, but everything in that container is Tim Holtz. So what I'm trying to say is I can't tell you the name of the ephemera packs where I have that from, but mainly, I mean, not piece by piece, not for every piece. So that's what I'm trying to say. But it's mainly the curator ephemera pack and the number strips. But perhaps there's there's perhaps one or two things that come from other packs, but that doesn't really matter because you can just take what you have. I've experienced, even if I am really in awe with Marlies project, and I was staring at it so often while I did this, when you compare yourself to something else or to someone else or to someone else's project, then you always think, oh, mine is not so nice and I want to make it better and I want to improve my skills. I want to learn here. And that's what was in my head the whole time. But with looking at her project as an inspiration, I got my own ideas. And in the end, if you would compare that, if you would put it next to each other, it looks totally different. And that's the cool thing about a crafty friend, isn't it? I mean, Marlies it was so crazy when she was here and we met for the first time. We created a whole video series together without any problems. Yeah, it was so crazy. It was nearly a little bit spooky. And it was this way for both of us. Yeah, we asked each other every day, do you have a problem? Is something going wrong perhaps? And we both were like, no, everything is fine. And I think that's a special thing. It's really, really a special thing. And yeah, perhaps we can do it in the future again. I would love to hear your comments about that. If you want to see us creating something together again, or if you think, oh no, that we don't need to see that. So you can leave a comment about that if you want. You can see on the right, there's a little strip that has just fallen down from the tag. Now it lays there upside down. This little piece is exactly the same piece of ephemera which Marlies has used on her project as well. She has glued that to the photo itself, and then she has attached a little of those tiny staples. I couldn't do that. Because my photo has not the right proportion for that, but I found exactly that piece in my stash, so that I thought I want to use it somewhere else on my project. And in a few seconds you will see me gluing it down. So there it is on the right there. And that was like a little pet. It was laying there the whole time, and I thought, don't forget it, don't forget it, you want to have it there. So I left it there. It was like a little dog sitting next to me and making some noises to be heard and to be glued down. Yeah, so here I've decided I can already glue the tag down. I've made some marks where to put those wooden pieces. And as I said, I've just glued them together to be able to then put them to the back. So I've glued 2 of those wooden pieces together. Make sure, if you want to do that, that you glue them as, how can I say that? So don't glue them too close to the edges of the tag, otherwise you would see them if you look from the side to your project. Hopefully that makes sense. That happened to me, if you want to hear it exactly. So when I look in a really crazy angle to my project, I could see those wooden pieces. It doesn't bother me because it's my project, it will hang on my wall. But if you want to give this away, for example, then make sure that you can't see those like mechanisms, yeah, like those wooden pieces. Here I have a little natural material where I don't know the name, Flechte in German. I found this here at the campsite on a walk, and I had that in one of my plant pots. I mean, this thing is dead, yeah, but I have put that there as a decoration, and now it's not there anymore because it's here on my project. I've just taken it out. Alternatively, you could also use some other like real natural materials, or if you like that, some fake natural materials. Or what you also can do is you can put some thread underneath of those things there to give this whole thing more interest. That's exactly what I'm doing here. I've chosen a black thread, which is a little bit thicker than the thread that came from my sewing machine, just to be sure that this is really visible. You can see the balance of this whole thing is a little bit weird. It's hard for the eye to understand the composition, I think. In the end, I would say it's better. I think I could manage to balance it, but in this moment, it's weird because the tag is more on the left. The focal point, this photo, is nearly in the middle, but not completely in the middle. And those leaves and also the flowers are like a diagonal, but at the same time that is broken. I don't know if you can understand what I am saying here, or if that makes any sense to you, but for me it was like that. And with these steps here, I'm trying to balance that. And I'm also trying to find places for the tinier pieces. Because I've learned from Marlies that those really, 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 really tiny details are the things that matter the most. I always I have always looked for those details, but I think not in such an extreme deep way. Do you know what I mean? So for this piece, I think I managed that really well, and I had open eyes for those, for the tiniest things, and that helped me a lot. So here I'm taking some of the moss that Marlies has brought to me as well. And here I'm trying out if that could work in combination with this other natural material, where I don't know the name. I thought the color is crazy a little bit, but in some way I liked it. And here I'm searching for the right place because I already knew that I wanted to use it, but I was not sure where the best place is. But yeah, Marlies says play around and add more things, add more layers. And I don't know why, but always when I sit at my desk, since I met her, I'm like, what would she do? That is so crazy. I have that with other people as well. Yeah. For example, with Barbara at 49 Dragonflies, she's a person with, a totally different style. We have made many projects together. We know each other really, really well. And I also think, what would Barbara do in this moment when I have a similar thing on my desk like she would have? And I think to realize those connections to different people that you like and that you know better in this crafty world is really, really important. If you can see that, and if you can feel this, and if you can have a conversation with the person, even if he or she is not there, I think that is very, very helpful for such a thing. And yeah, so excuse me, please. Back to the thing. The number that Marlies has on her project as well now went to the right side of the frame there, as you can see. I think that was not what I wanted to say. It went to the right side of the frame. That would mean it's glued to the frame. It's next to the frame. Holy moly. So as you can see it there, so that I have a connection to Marlies as well. And this connection will become even stronger in a few minutes because there happened something, I don't want to call it a coincidence because I don't believe in coincidences, but you will see that in a second. First, let's paint a little bit of brown paint around the paper here in a really loose and shabby way. I have painted the white acrylic paint in the very beginning, also really, really loose and really shabby, really, I don't want to say ugly, but, like it was made in no time. Yeah, someone who has painted it with no patience and no time. So that's what I was aiming for here. And I decided to make this a little bit darker to get more contrast to the collage. I wanted to have the tag like really popping out. That's also the reason why I've created the background so muted and grayish, because I wanted to be the tag, the star of this project. It's included into the rest, of course. It's part of the whole arrangement, but it's still popping out. Hopefully, in my eyes, it's popping out. So I'm splattering around a little bit as well with ground espresso and frayed burlap distress paint to make sure that this is not such a crazy harsh line around the collage. I also wanted to have some of those brown splatters on the collage to get a connection. And then I've decided to take some white acrylic paint and make this frame around the vignette display panel a little bit lighter so that it looks like, yeah, it's framed. When you hang this to your wall and you look at it, it looks like it has a white frame around it. And I think that brings a lot of calm feelings to this whole thing. This is really whimsical. It has many details. It has a lot of layers. It gets splatters here. And this white calms it down a little bit and gives it, yeah, a frame. Not only for the wall, but also for the eye, if that makes sense. Here you can see me working on the very last details. It's already the next day and I have looked at this with fresh eyes to see what I want to add. And then I had this thing. This little strip says "Sweet Forget-Me-Nots," and that is part of the collage strips by Tim Holtz. And I have cut that off in the very beginning when I cut the pieces for the background. And normally, to be honest, I don't read every sentence, every word on every piece of ephemera that I have in my stash. But that I have cut off, and then it was laying there, and I thought, what's written there? And then I read "Sweet Forget-Me-Nots," and I was like, what the heck? Perhaps you remember that Marlies has brought some forget-me-nots seeds in a Dutch wooden shoe. Perhaps you remember that from the video where we are unboxing the gift that she has brought to me. And that was such a sweet connection because forget-me-nots will always be something that brings my mind together with Marlies. Do you know what I mean? It's a connection. And to have that there and to find that in those collage strips, it's just amazing. I'm so happy with this piece and I'm hoping that Marlies likes it as well. Marlies, what do you think? And of course, I hope that you like it and that you could get some inspiration from this. If you have never made something like this, please just try it out. Please be brave and try it out. Take your supplies out and just try it. And please don't forget to watch Marlies' video. You can find that on her channel today, of course, as well. I hope we will see the next time. And oh, by the way, the link to her video is, of course, below this video in the description box so that you can find it directly. So have a very great and creative day. And hopefully we will see you the next time. Bye bye.